So, hello and good evening. In the last class, we were talking about regional cooperation and integration in India's neighborhood. So, we had made some understanding of the context and terminology of this particular form of cooperation. So, that part mainly is important for those who have optional, but not necessarily for those who have the subject as GS. But still, as a background and brief context, we talked about it. And then we talked about the issues which are important both ways, which is SARC and the details of SARC and the analysis in the context of its basic information that we had, and after that, the current context of SARC. And then we had done so by answering a question that we made, and the question was discussed in terms of answer, including the content which is required. So that was also another aspect of the discussion. And then we moved to the next question, and we said that in the absence of progress at SARC, or given the challenges faced by SARC, what are the options available to India to promote regional cooperation and integration in its neighborhood, right? So then we had started by introducing that there are three kinds of ideas which have been put forward or which could be put forward in this context. Each of these ideas has merits, but some of these ideas are limited. So we said three ideas are SARC minus one, which is SARC minus Pakistan. We discussed the context and we discussed its significance and we talked about its limitations. And then we had started by talking about the next option or next point, which is sub-regional cooperation within South Asia, within the SARC countries, but on the basis of a contiguous geography. So we started talking about BBIN as cooperation between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal, characterized by a contiguous geography and the opportunities which are there, but also by the fact that these countries are already implementing the motor vehicle agreement. All right. BBIN motor vehicle agreement is the concrete form of cooperation that we see now. And we have talked about that Bhutan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh all signed the agreement, but Bhutan is right now not participating in its implementation. So then we understood that the implementation of motor vehicle agreement is to address the issue of cross border vehicular traffic. So it is basically about rules. And then the potential of the BBIN we could understand by how it is working through two joint working groups. All right. So that's basically what we can largely also see as the potential of BBIN, what kind of work it can do. So it can do work of promoting trade, transit, and transport, but it also, apart from infrastructure connectivity, it also can work specifically in the areas of water resource cooperation, power generation, power trade, and transmission line connectivity, which is transforming national grids to regional grids or sub-regional grids. That is what we had talked about yesterday. In today's class, we will be continuing with this, and we will basically look at this as the part of the answer of the original question that we have asked. But in itself, BBIN can be a question. All right. So we will talk about various aspects of BBIN, why BBIN is contextual or relevant in South Asia, right? What is its potential? If it is implemented, what would happen? Agreement like motor vehicle agreement. So that is something that we'll do, and then we'll say that going forward, what is it that BBIN needs to do? So our learning today would be in terms of these questions, right? You should be judging your understanding on the basis of these questions, right? And then we will move towards the third point of the answer to the larger question, that is trans-regional or inter-regional cooperation. So thereby again we will see it as as a part of the answer to the original question, but in itself, we have already seen it has produced a question in the examination. So we'll talk about BIMSTEC in that context, and then we will look at the policies that India has towards its neighborhood in the form of Gujarat Doctrine and then neighborhood first, these policies. So with this and looking at some questions, we will end up our discussion on neighborhood in the context of South Asia, and then we will move to China. All right, that is basically what we'll be doing in today's class. So if you have read anything, if you have any questions, well, we can start with the answers to those. If there are any questions, otherwise, we will start with discussion of BBIN. All right. So when we talk about BBIN, we already had some discussion yesterday. So we first talk about how BBIN can change cooperation in South Asia, right? Why an initiative like BBIN is relevant beyond the idea of looking at an alternative for SARC. All right, BBIN itself is valuable because it is well within the objectives of SARC. It addresses some of the issues that we had discussed as limitations of SARC, for example, connectivity infrastructure. And if this happens, then it would lead to further such kind of cooperation all across the region. So in that context, we are going to talk about BBIN. Now, if we see from last class, continuing from last class, what you remember is that BBIN is a reference to, is an acronym for Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal. This is a contiguous geography, thereby all of them would benefit by working on infrastructure and connectivity to promote trade ties or people to people ties, right? So the first thing that we can write about is the vision of BBIN. All right, the vision of BBIN. The BBIN based cooperation, the BBIN based cooperation is most evident in the implementation of motor vehicle agreement, the implementation of motor vehicle agreement signed by these countries in 2015. This agreement would have multiple benefits in itself, seen in the context of the following facts. All right, so I was doing some reading, so from that I will quote some numbers and you will write, right? So there is the World Bank's blog has a lot of articles if somebody is interested in reading, right? So for example, the World Bank says that, and these are various examples, right? Just in case it is useful, use it. So basically it says that, for example, it takes 15 days to enter the ICP. It takes 15 days to enter the ICP at Petrapol. All right. It takes 3 days to enter ICP at Petrapol. 15 days. Huh. It takes 15 days to enter ICP at Petrapol. And further 3 days to offload goods at Benapol. further 3 days to offload goods at Benapole. In comparison, in East Africa, it takes an average of 6 hours. It takes an average of 6 hours to clear similar volumes of trade. In East Africa, it takes on average 6 hours to clear similar value of trade. Long delays lead to higher cost of trade. According to the World Bank report, Connecting to Thrive, it is World Bank report Connecting to Thrive, it is 15 to 20% cheaper. It is 15 to 20% cheaper for an Indian company to trade with Brazil or Germany. For an Indian company to trade with Brazil or Germany than with Bangladesh. You can write another example. It takes 22 documents. And signatures. It takes 22 documents and signatures to trade between India and Bangladesh. In Bhutan, the importers have to submit documents 86 times. In Bhutan, importers have to submit documents 86 times. And the exporters 74 times. You can write another example. While trade between BBIN countries has grown 6 times, between 2005 to 2019, while trade between BBIN countries has grown 6 times between 2005 to 2019, unexploited trade potential remains large. At 93% for Bangladesh, 50% for India, 76% for Nepal. और एग्जाम्पल लिखना है, एक और एग्जाम्पल लिखते हैं. ये सब वर्ल्ड बैंक जो रिपोर्ट हमने कही उसके अंदर है, राइट. Some borders officials check 80 to 100% of goods. At some borders officials check 80 to 100% of goods. right? ये what is this information useful for? Can anyone think about it? देखें, कलेक्टर बनना है ना आपको. Where would you present this data? In what context? What would you tell through this? Hmm? Okay, this is an impediment to ease of doing business. Okay, what else? Hmm? Need for economic cooperation. Yes. Market integration. So, of course, the context is all this, as you are saying, and that's why it is also an argument for cooperation like BBIN motor vehicle agreement, but not only limited to that. All right, not only limited to that. So, so basically, what we understand is that BBIN would create a certain momentum, which would be relevant, one relevant aspect of addressing these kinds of issues where the potential remains unmet. All right, where the trade can be larger. Either large time is being taken because of infrastructure or because of checkings. You have a turnout time. Now, this leads to cost of trade. That's where we said with Brazil also and with Germany also, which are far away countries, the trade would be of lower cost, right? So that's basically requires addressing, and that's what BBIN can do, right? So then that's why you will write next about the what BBIN stands for, all right? What BBIN stands for and its potential. So पहला हम लिखेंगे आपको इससे मतलब क्या समझ में आया? अनएक्सप्लॉइटेड ट्रेड पोटेंशियल है क्या मतलब है? ट्रेड का नंबर इतना बढ़ सकता है, इतना ट्रेड हो सकता है. हाँ, ट्रेड पोटेंशियल का मतलब और क्या हुआ? आप ज़्यादा एक्सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं, है ना? ट्रेड का कॉस्ट कम करके आप ट्रेड का फायदा बढ़ा सकते हैं, यही होगा ना इसका मतलब. और कुछ इसका मतलब नहीं होना चाहिए. वो भी इसका एक तरीका हो गया ना. एक्सपोर्ट आप ज़्यादा बढ़ाएंगे तो ज़्यादा कैटेगरी ऑफ एक्सपोर्ट भी बढ़ने के चांसेस हैं. जैसे मान लो if the turnaround time is reduces, then immediately perishable goods would benefit, right? Perishable goods तो टाइम डिपेंडेंट है. समझ में आ गई आपको बात? ठीक. भाई लॉजिस्टिक्स अरेंजमेंट या ट्रेडिशनल प्रैक्टिस, यही हो सकता है ना इसका रीजन कि एक तो ट्रेड बास्केट जो हमको खरीदना है, तो ब्राज़ील से एनर्जी खरीदते हैं, एग्रीकल्चरल प्रोडक्ट्स खरीदते हैं और उनको बेचते भी हैं वैल्यू एडेड. जर्मनी से मशीनरी वगैरह खरीदते हैं, है ना? तो ज़्यादा फायदेमंद ट्रेड रहा है वो, तो ज़्यादा लंबी प्रैक्टिस है उस ट्रेड की. यहाँ पे बॉर्डर का ट्रेड है इसलिए चेकिंग ज़्यादा है, वहाँ पे चेकिंग ज़्यादा नहीं है. चलिए और कुछ. तो हम आगे लिखने जा रहे थे अबाउट दी विजन ऑफ BBIN. ऑलराइट, विजन ऑफ BBIN. विजन ऑफ BBIN में हमने पहले कॉन्टेक्स्ट बनाया क्यों चाहिए BBIN. अब what BBIN cooperation can, what BBIN cooperation can lead to, lead to. One, the BBIN countries can benefit from cooperation in the areas of trade, transit and connectivity. Trade, transit and connectivity. In the areas of trade, transit and connectivity. Two, water resource management, water resource management, to water resource management and power generation potential of this region, power generation potential of this region can also be tapped by cooperation among can also be tapped by cooperation among these countries by can also be tapped by cooperation among these countries. Third, connected national grids connected national grids can be transformed into connected national grids can be transformed into sub-regional grids can be transformed into sub-regional grids to promote power trade. Next point, to promote power trade. Next point, such cooperation such cooperation would be instrumental such cooperation would be instrumental in promoting people to people contacts promoting people to people contacts. If the BBIN motor vehicle agreement is implemented, it would address many of the above discussed it would address many of the above discussed issues many of the above discussed issues in the following ways in the following ways. One, according to various estimates according to various estimates it would increase India's trade with South Asia by 60%. It would increase India's trade with South Asia by 60% and rest of the world with rest of the world by rest of the world by 30% by 30%. Second, this would enable efficient connectivity and transport efficient connectivity and transport development for the northeastern region of for the northeastern regions of for the northeastern regions of India. For the northeastern regions of India. Next point, third, the connectivity corridors the connectivity corridor created by such cooperation can be transformed into economic corridors of prosperity can be transformed into economic corridors of prosperity. Next point, the implementation of BBI and motor vehicle agreement. The implementation of BBI and motor vehicle agreement would further intensify people to people interactions, would further intensify people to people interactions by reducing travel time and increasing travel options and increasing travel options. The BBIN, next point, the BBIN motor vehicle agreement in its implementation would also strengthen many of the objectives of SARC, many of the objectives of SARC, as well as India's neighborhood first, as well as India's neighborhood first. Without writing in points, the next paragraph. The success of BBIN initiatives, the success of BBIN initiatives would signal a shift in South Asia towards a national consensus on regional cooperation. Regional cooperation. Thus intensifying, thus intensifying, thus intensifying the prospects of regional integration in South Asia, regional integration in South Asia further. Okay, now I will simply give you some examples. You can use them where you fit correct. All right. One example is after MVA, a truck traveling from after MVA, a truck traveling from Agartala to Kolkata, a truck traveling from Agartala to Kolkata would take 65% less time, 65% less time, and be about 68% cheaper. After MVA, a truck traveling from Agartala to Kolkata would take 65% less time and be about 68% cheaper. Be about 68% cheaper. The reference is to Kolkata port. Kolkata port. Second is seamless connectivity with India can raise income. Seamless connectivity with India can raise income or national income. Seamless connectivity with India can raise national income by as much as 17% by as much as 17%, while India would gain by 8%. While India would gain by 8%. Seamless connectivity with India can raise national income by as much as 17% in Bangladesh, while India would gain by 8%. All right. Now we can move towards identifying how BIMSTEC is being, how the BBI and Motor Vehicle Agreement is being implemented. So we already know that there are joint working groups which have been formed. All right, joint working groups have been formed between these countries. कल हमने बात की थी अगर आपको याद हो. And then this year, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal also held a meeting. India, Bangladesh, and Nepal held a meeting this year, right? To further recommit to implementing BBIN. सुधांशु, अगर बदतमीजी कर रहे हो तो मैं आज फाइनल लाइन खींच रहा हूं, है ना? हाथ खड़ा करना, अपने टाइम के लिए वेट करना और जबान से बोलना, लैंग्वेज से, बॉडी लैंग्वेज से नहीं. ये 3 चीजें सीख लो. क्लास से पहले या क्लास के बाद अगर अवेलेबल हो, पर्सनल कोई प्रॉब्लम हो, वो डिस्कस कर लो. अभी मैं बोल रहा हूं, बोलने के बीच में ये कोई तरीका नहीं होता है. हाथ खड़ा करें आप, आपकी आवाज के अलावा मुझे आपका हाथ दिखाई देता है ना? और ये रवैया छोड़ना पड़ेगा आपको. वेयर वाज आई? एनीवन, कुड एनीवन रिमाइंड मी? हाँ हाँ. सो जॉइंट वर्किंग ग्रुप्स हैव बीन फॉर्म्ड. यस्टरडे वी हैड टॉक्ड अबाउट इट. दिस ईयर अगर करंट अफेयर्स आप पढ़ रहे हैं, दिस ईयर वी have already seen a meeting taking place between India, Nepal and Bangladesh. All right. और इस मीटिंग में इन्होंने तय किया, they have decided to go ahead with the implementation. All right. Meaning giving impetus to the implementation. Right. ये प्रोग्रेस है अभी तक. ये आपको भी जानना चाहिए करंट अफेयर्स पे. ये किसी की जिम्मेदारी नहीं है आपको बताना. करंट अफेयर्स सबके लिए अवेलेबल है. आपको पढ़ना चाहिए था. पढ़ के आएंगे तो आपको पता होगा. नहीं पढ़ के आएंगे तो लिखते जाइए जितना लिखना है आपको. चलिए, इसके अलावा और क्या हो रहा है हमको कैसे पता है? जब भी किसी स्कीम के बारे में, व्हेन वी हैव टू थिंक दैट वेदर अ स्कीम वुड वर्क और नॉट, वी ऑलवेज सी हाउ इज इट बीइंग सपोर्टेड. सो फॉर एग्जांपल देयर आर अदर स्टेप्स, राइट? फॉर एग्जांपल नंबर 1, India has allocated around 1.5 billion US dollars for infrastructure upgradation. All right, ये एक चीज दिखती है हमको, that India has allocated 1.5 billion US dollars for the upgradation of infrastructure. All right. And where do you think this infrastructure is being made? Of course, India, if it is building infrastructure in Northeast, that is also a relevant infrastructure for BBIN. Of course, इसके अलावा ICPs बनाना, ये सारी चीजें भी, तो ये बात कह रहे हैं. Second aspect that we can write about of progress is that trial runs have been conducted. Trial runs have been conducted. Trial runs have been conducted on the Delhi Dhaka, Delhi Kolkata Dhaka route, Delhi Kolkata Dhaka route, and Agartala Dhaka Kolkata routes. All right. So trial runs have also been conducted when you practice whether this is possible or not, right? So ये progress है. तीसरा, third aspect of progress that we can see is the SASEC initiative, SASEC, capital, all capitals, SASEC. The SASEC initiative, SASEC, SASEC, इसका मतलब है, the full form is South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation. South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation. Right? So the SASEC under the ADB, Asian Development Bank, SASEC under the Asian Development Bank would be providing technical and financial assistance to the BBIN MVA. To provide technical and financial assistance to the BBIN MVA. The World Bank, next point. The World Bank has also allocated assistance to Bangladesh and Nepal. Bangladesh and Nepal. Bangladesh and Nepal for improvement in trade and border infrastructure. For improvement in trade and border infrastructure. Now we will write something which sometimes happens in conclusions when we summarize things, right? So we will write simply the early implementation of BBIN can lead to shorter transport routes, quicker travel times, and lower costs, in addition to smaller carbon footprint. In the region. All right. In addition to smaller carbon footprint in the region. Right. So either sometimes just feel the nature of it. Either sometimes your conclusion would look something like this, which is encapsulating, summarizing something, or you may also then add, which you will write now. However, for this to happen, the following needs to be addressed. One, bilateral contentions in other areas should not be allowed to derail cooperation at BBIN. Two, much of this region is socially diverse. Is socially diverse and has its own political and security challenges. Which must be addressed through domestic mechanisms which must be addressed through domestic mechanisms for BBIN to make for BBIN to make progress. For BBIN to make progress. In this context, without points, separate from points, in this context, all the countries, including India, in this context, all the countries, including India, need to adopt, need to adopt a whole of the government, a whole of the government approach, whole of the government approach with with adequate participation of with adequate participation of social and local social and local stakeholders, social and local stakeholders. Okay, generally what you can do is on the next page you can also write that we have also addressed issues of infrastructure, connectivity and trade. So generally in South Asia, for example, or in BBIN for that matter also, what particular steps can be taken for improvement, है ना? तो ये तो है ही, पर इसके अलावा अगर मान लो इंक्लूड करना हो और तो basically we can suggest a few things. One, these countries need to work on these countries need to work on simpler regulations. These countries need to work on simpler regulations. Two, physical checking at the border needs to be minimized. Physical checking at the border needs to be minimized. Digitization and automation. Digitization and automation. And automation can further help in reducing digitization and automation can further help in reducing the time and cost of trade, further reducing the time and cost of trade. Furthermore, these countries need to furthermore next point, these countries need to work on improving border infrastructure. These countries need to work on improving border infrastructure to expand capacities, to expand capacity of the ICPs, to expand capacity of the ICPs, integrated checkposts. Well, this is done. All right, all that we had to know about BBIN. Now, Sudhanshu, if you have any question, this is your turn. यहाँ तक वेट करना चाहिए था. Now you can look at it, and perhaps if you want to ask something, you can. बोलो. Hmm. 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 Okay, the meaning of this. Okay. Anything else? बोलो. हाँ. तो दूसरे क्वेश्चन के बिना डिटेल में जाए हुए आंसर मेरा सिंपल है यस. दिस इज द फॉर्म ऑफ कोऑपरेशन दैट यू विल बी सीइंग. राइट. फॉर एग्जांपल सप्लाई चेन रेजिलियंस का एक तरीका होता है फ्रेंड शोरिंग, नियर शोरिंग, फ्रेंड शोरिंग, है ना, ऑफ शोरिंग जिसको कहते हैं, बाहर से आप जो काम कराते हैं. ठीक है, तो इसका दूसरे का तो आंसर बहुत आसान सा है यस. That deglobalization, if it is visible at global level, an economic possible economic response would be cooperation among friendly countries and cooperation among countries which are geographically closer. All right. So yeah, that is the answer. Anything else? Anyone? हाँ सुधांशु. तो फिर उसे मैं हाथ क्यों खड़ा किया था? मुझे भी समझने में मदद करो भाई कि वो ये, because I am not able to understand your issues, though I have been trying to address them since the first lecture. है ना? You need to understand that rather than me coming to your speed, your attempt should be you coming to my speed, because I am not in a competitive examination, right? So I can afford to be slow, but if you don't come up to my speed, then it would be slower, the process would be slower, right? So पहला question जो था तुम्हारा वो आंसर कर देते हैं, which is what is the meaning of the corridors of connectivity can be transformed into economic corridors of prosperity. So that's a very simple thing. If you have observed something around you, for example, if the government announces a major highway project, right? Sadak aati hai. What happens in the surrounding region, right? तो ये तो economic activity ये हो गई. समझ गए बात? Property activities go up. Now, if vehicles start moving on that particular road, traffic picks up, what would happen? What other kind of economic activity would you see? Huh? Right. Generally, you will see surrounding area would start developing, right? From small shops, dhabas, right, to petrol pumps, these kinds of businesses, small businesses, large businesses, to the extent that infrastructure is one of the location factors of location factor पढ़ा है ना industry का. Infrastructure is one location factor for industry. So that is the meaning of it. Range of economic advantages can come out of this infrastructure and connectivity. That is something that is up to the future, right? How do we take advantage of it, right? So we can think of a large export zone on India's eastern coast that would include Bangladesh, India, right? And that would also include export from countries like Nepal or export of countries like Bhutan, right? Of course, from India and Bangladesh also. So that is what we are saying. So these are all possibilities, but this is, you know, at the level of understanding, it is very simple. If you can understand what benefits come with the construction of a large highway to a particular region, of course there would be problems also. यूपीएससी में है तो problems भी सोचेंगे. ये पर इस एग्जांपल से भी आप इसको समझ सकते हैं, right? Meaning of smaller carbon footprint, right? Meaning of smaller carbon footprint. I think you are a decade late. We are trying today everywhere to combat something called climate change. Climate change is considered to be accelerated by what is called anthropogenic activities, which is human activities. One of the most important example is industrialization. It is typically human activity. Industrialization led to A was based on and led to increase in energy use. All right. And most prominent category of fuel that human beings developed and used commonly was the hydrocarbons or coal. Now, the combustion of these fuels leads to the emission of certain gases, which in a particular context are called greenhouse gases because they have that particular effect in the atmosphere, right? Whereby they trap the sun rays. And over a long period, when this happens, we see characteristic shift in global sea surface temperature. So, since the problem is coming because of the emission of carbon and the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere, the idea is that we should think about, first of all, reducing the emissions, cut down the carbon emissions that we have. Second idea is we should trap the carbon which is going to be released, all right, by carbon sequestration, etc. And then the idea also is to move towards such alternatives which lead to lesser emission or no emission at all, right? So that is called green energy transition. So that's a long answer to the question. This is what you will study. If you study, this is what you will understand. Carbon footprint is a reference to how much carbon an economy emits through its economic activities. All right. So ये है carbon footprint, and every country would like to, every individual also should, once they become aware, try to cut down on carbon footprint, right? मतलब आपका consumption. So that's why you will see people advise you to use metal bottles rather than plastic bottles, because plastic bottles are not reusable, metal bottles are reusable. समझ गए आप? सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी का कॉन्सेप्ट भी इससे जुड़ा हुआ है. चलिए ये भी हो गया. Anything else? Nothing? Okay, so the next thing that we will be doing is understand the references to the larger question that we had yesterday created. So this is part of that answer, but in itself, it is also a large area from which UPSC already had asked a question, right? So we are now talking about trans-regional or inter-regional option, all right? Trans-regional or inter-regional option, right? For promoting what? For promoting regional integration and regional cooperation and integration where? In India's neighborhood. All right. So we need to know what is that option. So it's very clear. We can start by writing very simply that in recent years, BIMSTEC, BIMSTEC has emerged as a focused upon option to promote regional cooperation and integration, regional cooperation and integration in the neighborhood, and beyond, in the neighborhood and beyond, by India. By India. Okay. So when you are asking this question, it's very simple. First, few things that we need to know are the basic facts. So what is BIMSTEC? And I hope all of you could spell it correctly. Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. All right. Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. I didn't think you need to write this also, but still, if you want to, please. So, the BIMSTEC is an intergovernmental organization comprising, BIMSTEC is an intergovernmental organization comprising how many members are there in BIMSTEC? Okay. comprising 7 countries, और 7 के बाद लिखिए, 7 के बाद लिखिए, जो भी लिखा हो उसको काटिए. 7 बे ऑफ बंगाल, 7 बे ऑफ बंगाल littoral, 7 Bay of Bengal littoral and adjacent countries, 7 Bay of Bengal littoral and adjacent countries, 7 Bay of Bengal littoral and adjacent countries, namely BBIN. ये केवल याद रखने के लिए BBIN लेना देना इससे उतना ही है कि ये एरिया ओवरलैप होता है. तो जो इनिशिएटिव BBIN है वही बिम्स्टेक का एरिया भी वही है, राइट. BBIN plus MTS, all right, which is Myanmar, Thailand and Sri Lanka. BBIN plus MTS, right? Myanmar, Thailand and Sri Lanka. When was this organization formed? It was formed in the year 1997. Its secretariat is in Dhaka. All right, its secretariat is in Dhaka. It was formed at a meeting in Bangkok, right? And based on Bangkok Declaration of 1997. Gradually, its membership increased. For example, 2004, Bhutan and Nepal joined it, and it was named eventually BIMSTEC, right? After that, BIMSTEC, it became BIMSTEC. And we know that its purpose is to promote cooperation in 7 sectors. 7 sectors of cooperation now, right? In 2022, this has happened. Earlier, it was 16 sectors, right? So that is basically what it does. It promotes cooperation among these countries across 7 sectors, right? And then its, of course, its highest meeting is the summit. The first summit of BIMSTEC took place in 2004 at Bangkok, 2008 in Delhi, 2014 at Naypyidaw, 2018 at Kathmandu, and 2022 it was virtual but hosted by Sri Lanka. All right, hosted by Sri Lanka. Right. So these have been its summits: 2004 Bangkok, 8 Delhi, 14 Naypyidaw, 18 Kathmandu, and 22 Sri Lanka. Right. So this is one thing, but why is it important? If you have to answer that question, significance question, you sometimes answer it by some numbers. All right. So the significance of BIMSTEC derives from the following, meaning also its potential, right? In one way. So one, it is based on a common geography. It is based on a common geography defined around the Bay of Bengal, defined around the Bay of Bengal region. Defined around the Bay of Bengal region. Thus, it comprises of countries located in a contiguous geography, both on the land, countries located in a contiguous geography both Countries located in a contiguous geography, located on both land and around the maritime region, around the maritime region. Number 2, the BIMSTEC countries have a cumulative population of the BIMSTEC countries have a cumulative population of more than 1.7 billion. The BIMSTEC countries have a cumulative population of more than 1.7 billion. This region, next point, this region is comprised of this region is comprised of some of the most dynamic some of the most dynamic and fast growing economies, some of the most dynamic and fast growing economies like Thailand, India, like Thailand and India, like Thailand and India. Next, these countries lack any major political these countries lack any major bilateral these countries lack any major bilateral contentions. These countries lack any major bilateral contentions. Thus, they have a greater prospect of cooperation currently. They have a greater prospect of cooperation currently as compared with as compared with SARC. As compared with SARC. Next, next, next point. The Bay of Bengal region. The Bay of Bengal region is a link between the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean. So are the members of so are the members of BIMSTEC. So are the members of BIMSTEC. This region this region is an important passage for regional and global trade. Important passage for regional and global trade. Next point. These countries share a broad common cultural and civilizational commonality. Next point. The members of BIMSTEC bring together countries of South and Southeast Asia, countries of South and Southeast Asia. Thus, it acts as thus countries of South and Southeast Asia. Thus, it acts as a bridge between. Thus, it acts as a bridge between the two regions. Bridge between the two regions. Right here, we have written about the significance of BIMSTEC based on its geography, membership, economic potential, its regional potential, its larger global potential, right? So in case you were thinking what is diversity in answers, this is diversity in answers. Some people take even the end of the whole course not to understand this, because you tend to develop a mechanical way of thinking कि ये समझा, ये पढ़ा और ये हो गया एग्जाम. कॉन्स्टेंटली अपना स्टाइल भी इवॉल्व नहीं करते रहते, तो उससे नुकसान होता है, राइट? फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आई इंटरव्यूड समवन today and they told me that their mistake was that they were not prepared for mains for their first attempt. So when they wrote mains, they realized it. So before writing your first one, realize this, that you should always be mains ready. All right? अगर आपका एम्बिशन केवल पीटी निकालना है और केवल पीटी निकालने से होता है, पहले तो दोनों में अंतर नहीं है, दोनों एग्जामों में. लेकिन अगर बहुत ज़्यादा ऑब्सेस कर भी लिया पीटी के साथ, पीटी निकल भी गया, एंड इफ़ यू आर नॉट मेंस रेडी, ये देखने में बहुत आसान लगता है कि पीटी हो गया तो फिर देख लेंगे. वो तब जब अपने को कॉन्फिडेंस देना हो, बट अदरवाइज जब समय है आपके पास, यू जस्ट रियलाइज दिस, राइट? सो इफ you can think about diversifying your answers through different points, this is one way of doing it, is all I am suggesting. Now let's bring India into this. All right, let's bring India into this. For India, interest in BIMSTEC is evident. Interest in BIMSTEC is evident as it has been the founding member. Interest in BIMSTEC is evident as it has been the founding member, as it has been the founding member. Full stop. Most recently, India has taken a keen interest. Most recently, India has taken a keen interest in reinvigorating the organization, as seen in one, reinvigorating the organization since 2016. Right? Now, one, India hosted a BRICS BIMSTEC. India hosted a BRICS BIMSTEC outreach. India hosted a BRICS BIMSTEC outreach at Goa in 2016. At Goa in 2016. At Goa in 2016. Two, the Prime Minister participated in the 2018 summit and called for strengthening of cooperation at BIMSTEC, India India proposed conducting a proposed and hosted India proposed and hosted the first ever BIMSTEC military exercise, the first ever BIMSTEC military exercise called MILEX, called MILEX in the time to follow, called MILEX in the time to follow. Next point. Next point. Called MILEX in the time to follow. Next point लिखें. In 2019, the leaders of BIMSTEC. In 2019, the leaders of BIMSTEC were invited to participate in the. In 2019, the leaders of BIMSTEC were invited to participate in the swearing in ceremony. In the swearing in ceremony of the government. In the swearing in ceremony of the government at New Delhi. At New Delhi. India also hosted a BIMSTEC conclave of ports. India also hosted a BIMSTEC conclave of ports in 2019. In 2019. Now write without points. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar had stated that India finds possibilities and harmony possibilities as well as, right, change it, possibilities as well as synergy and harmony, possibilities as well as synergy and harmony at BIMSTEC. Such sentiments and India's keen interest in recent times, such sentiments and India's keen interest in the recent times are keeping in mind the following. One. BIMSTEC intersects, or BIMSTEC lies at the intersection of, BIMSTEC lies in the intersection of, or at the intersection rather, at the intersection of, BIMSTEC lies at the intersection of India's neighborhood first as well as Act East, India's neighborhood first as well as Act East policies, Two, BIMSTEC countries are relevant for promoting trade cooperation, trade cooperation in the neighborhood, in the neighborhood as well as in the neighborhood as well as in the India ASEAN, as well as in the India ASEAN free trade area, as well as in the India ASEAN free trade area. This includes advancing objectives such as ensuring supply chain integration, ensuring supply chain integration, diversification, ensuring supply chain integration, diversification, and resilience. And resilience. Next point. पेन बदल के देखो, स्लो हो, पेन बदल के देखो, right? Now next point. The BIMSTEC is based on geographic contiguity. The BIMSTEC is based on geographic contiguity. Therefore, it is relevant for promoting connectivity objectives, for promoting connectivity objectives. Next point. The BIMSTEC countries are relevant for cooperation in tackling issues like transnational issues like terrorism, transnational issues like terrorism, spread of radicalization, spread of radicalization, and drug trafficking, Next, the BIMSTEC countries can be partners in the economic growth. The BIMSTEC countries can be partners in the economic growth of India's northeastern region, as well as states on the eastern, and southern coasts. States on the eastern and southern coasts. Next, eastern and southern coasts. Next, the BIMSTEC does not have involvement of China. The BIMSTEC does not have involvement of China at any level. However, or therefore, not however, therefore, its relevance geostrategically is geostrategically of interest in the context of is of interest in the context of the Indo Pacific, in the context of the Indo Pacific. Chaliye, very good. We will take a break here. You may also read if you want to. After the break, we continue. Either take your doubts or continue to complete our discussion on BIMSTEC in all its aspects, right? But after the break, here is the break. Okay. So let's now talk about BIMSTEC further, right? Hopefully your break is over. All of you are here. So we'll be talking about BIMSTEC further, which means we will talk about the prospects of BIMSTEC, and that would include the limitations, right? Limitations and the limitations which need to be addressed. They can be understood in both ways, right? So we will again start with writing. Please write. And we are, as we said, talking about challenges or limitations which need to be addressed, right? So we'll start by writing BIMSTEC holds while BIMSTEC holds significant prospects while BIMSTEC holds significant prospects for its members and for the promotion of India's interest for the for the promotion of India's interests for the promotion of India's interests, comma, it also suffers from the following limitations. The following limitations. One, poor state of connectivity, among the countries of BIMSTEC, among the countries of BIMSTEC. Two, BIMSTEC has lagged institutionalization. BIMSTEC has lagged institutionalization and regularity. For example, its secretariat was established only in 2014. For example, its secretariat was established only in 2014. And in 25 years, this being the 25th year, in 25 years of its existence, it has held only 5 summits so far. It has held only 5 summits so far. Its focus has been diffused. Next point. Its focused has been diffused. Its focus has been diffused, as is evident in 14 sectors, as is evident in 14 sectors of cooperation identified over the years. 14 sectors of cooperation identified. 14 sectors of cooperation identified over the years. Next point. Next point. Intra-regional trade among BIMSTEC countries. Next point. Intra-regional trade among BIMSTEC countries stands at around 70 billion US dollars. Intra-regional trade between BIMSTEC countries stands at around 70 billion US dollars. 70 billion US dollars, amounting to 7% of their global trade. Amounting to 7% of their global trade. Next point. Not the next point, but in the same. This is low as compared to intra-regional trade among ASEAN countries. Intra-regional trade among ASEAN countries at around 600 billion US dollars, at around 600 billion US dollars, amounting to 600 billion US dollars, amounting to 23% of their trade globally. Amounting to 23% of their trade globally. These countries, next point, these countries have their own sets of relation with China. These countries have their own sets of relation with China, India, and the West. China, India, and the West. Thus, they may lack a common geopolitical. Thus, they may lack a common geopolitical and geostrategic outlook. Common geopolitical and geostrategic outlook. Right? So, of course, when we discuss something like this, we simply say that these need to be addressed. Right? So, thereby, what we'll do next is, we will write about, as moving towards the conclusion of this topic, about what needs to be done, and also simultaneously what India has done, given the fact that India needs to do or revive the BIMSTEC. All right. The above limitations need to be the above limitations need to be addressed and should be the focus of India to ensure BIMSTEC's or to ensure its relevance for India's interest, ensure its relevance for India's interests. In this context, the following are important. In this context, the following are important. One, focus on institutionalizing cooperation. Focus on institutionalizing cooperation at BIMSTEC. Focus on institutionalizing cooperation at BIMSTEC by strengthening the secretariat by strengthening the secretariat and working on agreements and rules of engagements smoothening cooperation. In this context, the adoption of a charter by the organization in 2022 adoption of a charter by the organization in 2022 is a positive step. All right, is a positive step. Number 2, transforming the potential of cooperation in trade. Transforming the potential of cooperation in trade would require making progress on the BIMSTEC, free trade agreement, making progress in the BIMSTEC free trade agreement negotiations on which started in 2000 and 2018. Next, working on connectivity among the member countries in different formats. Working on connectivity among the member countries in different formats is essential. In this context, the adoption of a BIMSTEC master plan for connectivity cooperation. In this context, the adoption of a BIMSTEC connectivity master plan, is master plan in 2022 would is a welcome measure. The need is to make progress The need is to make progress in its implementation. The need is to make progress in its implementation. The need is to make progress in implementation. This purpose would further benefit by the completion of this purpose would further be benefited by the completion of projects like the BBIN, projects like the BBIN MVA, like the BBIN MVA, Kaladan, like the BBIN MVA, Kaladan multimodal project, and trilateral Asian highway project. This purpose would further benefit from the completion of BBI and MVA project, Kaladan multimodal project, and trilateral Asian highway project. Further, further the need is to build convergence between them. Further, the need is to build convergence between them. Further, the need is to build convergence between them. Convergence between them. Okay. Next point. The countries need to Next point. The countries need to develop a common strategic outlook, a common strategic outlook given given the evolving global order, evolving global order, and changing relations between major powers, and changing relations between major powers in arenas like the Indo Pacific, Next, we have covered all the points which needs to be there. Next, we'll simply write something relevant to this and what has happened. Rather, write another point. Next point. The focus has to be on implementation. The focus has to be on implementation in the 7 sectors the focus has to be on implementation. In this context, reduction of sectors of cooperation. In this context, reduction of sectors of cooperation to 7. Reduction of sectors of cooperation to 7 in 2022. In 2022 is the right step. In this context, the lead countries for each of these sectors. In this context, the lead countries for each of these sectors bears a special responsibility. Bears a special responsibility. In conclusion, one may say that BIMSTEC is currently a preferred option. That the BIMSTEC is currently a preferred option for promoting the objective of regional cooperation and integration in the neighborhood. The promotion of regional cooperation and integration in the neighborhood by India. By India. At the 22nd summit, at the 22nd summit, India called for, at the 22nd summit, India called for expediting cooperation. India called for expediting cooperation in trade, connectivity and security and security. India further called for the BIMSTEC to become India further called for the BIMSTEC to become a bridge of connectivity, prosperity, a bridge of connectivity, prosperity, a bridge of connectivity, prosperity, and security among member countries. Connectivity, prosperity, and security among member countries. All right. India contributes about 32%. India contributes about 32% of the budget of BIMSTEC Secretariat. India contributes about 32% of the budget of BIMSTEC Secretariat. At the 2002 summit, India's announcement, at the 2002 summit, India's announcement of providing 1 million US, of providing 1 million US dollars, 1 million US dollars to strengthen the BIMSTEC Secretariat, to strengthen the BIMSTEC Secretariat is a step to be emulated, is a step to be emulated. India as the lead of security pillar, India as the lead of the security sector of cooperation, as the lead of security sector of cooperation, including transnational terrorism, crime, including transnational terrorism, crime, and disasters, and disasters, and disasters, stands in a position to lead by example, stands in a position to lead by example. Okay, this is our discussion on BIMSTEC done. This is our discussion on BIMSTEC done. ठीक है. if you want to read more, and you should have, BIMSTEC has been covered in this year's current affairs because BIMSTEC has held the fifth summit. तो करंट अफेयर्स भी देखेंगे तो काफी कुछ हो जाएगा, राइट? Anyone, what was the theme of this year's summit? Theme of this year's summit? क्या था थीम इस ईयर के समिट का? चलिए कोई, that is not an important information. The theme of this year's summit was towards a resilient region, prosperous economies, healthy population. Robin, how different are BIMSTEC and Indian Ocean Rim Association in terms of their objectives? Robin, we will talk about Indian Ocean Rim Association separately. So that would be a separate topic. So that would be the appropriate opportunity to understand what is that in it that Indian Ocean Rim Association does, right? So now you have adequate information written down with you. Your job is to keep reading. If you have any doubt from what we have done so far, you can ask them as a question. All right, as question you can ask things that you would like to understand from the charter. चार्टर में प्रिंसिपल्स होते हैं भाई। कुछ चीजें पॉलिसी की, कुछ चीजें पॉलिटिक्स की हैं, है ना? तो चार्टर तो एक लीगल पर्सनालिटी देता है किसी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को, उसके एम्स ऑब्जेक्टिव्स बताता है, उसके प्रिंसिपल्स बताता है, मतलब एक कॉन्क्रीट शेप देता है उसके कोऑपरेशन को, ऐसा हम कह सकते हैं। एक तरह से फाउंडेशनल डॉक्यूमेंट हो गया, एक तरह से रिटन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन हो गया, है ना? भाई पहले तो वो एक पॉइंट है, उसके सिग्निफिकेंस को जानने की जरूरत नहीं है। अगर पढ़ोगे तो वो किसी चीज के एग्जाम्पल की तरह दिया हुआ है। क्या एग्जाम्पल है किस चीज का? नहीं। हम्म। जब आप पढ़ने में ही इतना अंतर होगा कि दो लोगों को अलग अलग चीज समझ में आ रही है तो कैसे चलेगा काम? आप सवाल कहाँ से लेके आ रहे हैं? वो लिखा हुआ है ना पहले कि दो चीजें लिखी हुई है। इंडिया पूरी लाइन विथ फुल स्टॉप पढ़ने की आदत डालो। पहली लाइन है इंडिया इज अ फाउंडिंग मेंबर, इससे उसका इंटरेस्ट दिखता है, हिंदी में बता रहा हूँ। हाँ, वो पहली लाइन है ना, उसके बाद फुल स्टॉप है, उसके बाद अगली लाइन क्या है? उसमें कहीं लिखा हुआ है रीसेंट टाइम्स। रीसेंट टाइम्स में इंडिया के इंटरेस्ट लेने के क्या उदाहरण है, उस तरह से हमने लिखा उसका एग्जाम्पल। यही तो मैं आपको समझा रहा हूँ ना कि ये इस चीज का एग्जाम्पल है। इंडिया फाउंडिंग मेंबर है, इसका एग्जाम्पल नहीं है ये। आप सोचिए, दिमाग लगाइए, 2016 में क्या और हुआ था? सोचिए क्या हुआ होगा। ब्रिक्स ब्रिक्स बिम्स्टेक आउटरीच इंडिया में हुआ, तो इसके अलावा और क्या होना चाहिए, जरूरी है जो हुआ हो इंडिया में? ब्रिक्स की समिट, ब्रिक्स की समिट हुई थी इंडिया में, इंडिया ने होस्ट किया था समिट। तो आप सिग्निफिकेंस नहीं पूछ रहे हैं कि इसका सिग्निफिकेंस होगा कि इससे इकोनॉमिक कोऑपरेशन बढ़ेगा, ये बढ़ेगा, वो बढ़ेगा। सिग्निफिकेंस सवाल नहीं है आपका। पहले तो कॉन्टेक्स्ट समझिए कि इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एग्जांपल दिया गया। दूसरा, इंडिया हैड होस्टेड अ ब्रिक्स समिट इन दैट ईयर, सो इट इनवाइटेड बिम्स्टेक लीडर्स टू इंटरैक्ट विथ ब्रिक्स लीडर्स। समझ गए आप इस बात को? अब ये जब भी ब्रिक्स कोई समिट होस्ट करता है, अपने आसपास के देशों के लोगों को बुलाता है। तो इसका सिग्निफिकेंस इतना ही कि इट सिग्नल्स that India did not invite SAARC countries, leaders of SAARC countries, but that of BIMSTEC countries. यानी कि ये कॉन्टेक्स्ट से ही फ्लो होता है. इसका सिग्निफिकेंस ये है कि ये दिखाता है कि इंडिया वॉज प्रायोरिटाइजिंग BIMSTEC. ये सिग्निफिकेंस है. ऑल राइट. और कुछ 2019 में स्वेरिंग इन में बिम्स्टेक को इनवाइट किया. पूछोगे इसका सिग्निफिकेंस क्या है, फिर मैं आंसर वही होगा. एग्जाम्पल से बोल रहा हूँ तुमको, आंसर वही होगा ना. कॉन्टेक्स्ट के एग्जाम्पल के रूप में दिया हुआ है कि रीसेंट इंटरेस्ट, और कंपैरेटिवली 2014 में किसको इनवाइट किया था स्वेरिंग इन सेरेमनी में? लीडर्स ऑफ सार्क कंट्रीज. 2019 में किसको किया? 2019 में किसको किया? फिर लिखा है ना हमने स्वेरिंग इन पे. तो अब इसमें आई डोंट नो क्या होता है भाई, जो लिखा ही हुआ है ना. तो ये इसीलिए पहले वो लिखा है और उसके बाद पढ़ेंगे. तो ये पढ़ने पढ़ने का अंतर है. पूरी लाइन पढ़ो, जल्दी मत रहो. आप जल्दी में रह सकते हो यूपीएससी में. यूपीएससी जल्दी में नहीं है. वो आपको एक अटेम्प्ट की चीज़ 3 अटेम्प्ट में सिखा देगा. तो इसीलिए शुरुआत से पेशेंस एक बहुत बड़ा गुण है यूपीएससी प्रिपरेशन के लिए. पेशेंस. कोई भी चीज़ पहले अपना एफर्ट होना चाहिए सबसे ज़्यादा उस चीज़ को क्लैरिफाई करने में. जब हम अपना एफर्ट लगाएंगे तो आर क्वेश्चंस वुड बी शार्पर. ऑल राइट. इफ आर क्वेश्चंस आर शार्पर, द जॉब्स, द replies would be quicker, and more importantly replies would be relevant. क्योंकि most of the students ask hypothetical doubts जब उनको मौका मिलता है बात करने का. hypothetical doubts, but when a student has worked और वो जो डाउट लेके आता है, हाइपोथेटिकल डाउट का जो जवाब होता है वो होता है ज्ञान. ऑल राइट. कि ज्ञान दिया जा सकता है. भाई आप किसी हाइपोथेटिकल चीज़ से बोलो ज्ञान दिया जा सकता है, पर कोई कंक्रीट चीज़ का जवाब कंक्रीट ही होगा ना. आपकी मदद मिलेगी. जैसे मुझे लिखने में प्रॉब्लम होती है, एक ये हो गया, ये होगी हाइपोथेटिकल प्रॉब्लम. कॉन्क्रीट प्रॉब्लम, सर आई हैव रिटन दिस एंड इन दिस पार्ट आई एम फाइंडिंग सम डिफिकल्टी और आई वुड नीड सम हेल्प. ये कॉन्क्रीट हाइपोथेसिस हो गया. तो ऐसा करने की जरूरत है हमको. हु मेड चार्टर? बिम्स्टेक कंट्रीज सेक्रेटेरिएट. राइट. दे वुड बी ड्राफ्टिंग दी चार्टर. राइट. ये और ये सवाल यूपीएससी में कोई अगर आपसे पूछे तो इसका आसान सा जवाब हो सकता है आई डोंट नो. पर कोई पूछेगा नहीं हु मेड द चार्टर. कंट्रीज निगोशिएटेड, इट्स सेक्रेटेरिएट. जैसे जो लॉज, हु मेक्स लॉज इन इंडिया? कौन बनाता है लॉज इंडिया में? लेजिस्लेचर बनाता है. ठीक है. लेकिन वो लॉ ड्राफ्ट तो कोई मिनिस्ट्री, कोई एग्जीक्यूटिव करता होगा ना. तो इसके दो चीजें हो सकती है. हु मेड द चार्टर, पहला आंसर तो ऑब्वियस है, बिम्स्टेक कंट्रीज. दूसरा आंसर ये है जैसे लॉ ड्राफ्ट करने के लिए कुछ मिनिस्ट्रीज, डिपार्टमेंट्स काम करते हैं, वैसे ही चार्टर एटसेट्रा वुड बी ड्राफ्टेड बाय द सेक्रेटेरिएट. ऑल राइट. इट हैज 7 सेक्टर्स नाउ. दिस हैज हैपेंड हियर एंड इंडिया इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर सिक्योरिटी सेक्टर. इसका सिंपल मतलब होता है द कंट्री वुड बी लीडिंग मीटिंग्स, प्रपोजल्स ऑफ दिस एरिया ऑफ कोऑपरेशन. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि हम वहाँ पे पुलिस फोर्स भेजेंगे. राइट. वी विल लीड डेलिबरेशंस इन दिस पर्टिकुलर area. Right. Sooner or later you would also have to develop this sense to move beyond the obvious questions. There is nothing wrong with that. Chaliye. Anything else that needs to be answered? Okay. If you don't have any question, then of course you can judge yourself on some parameters. What parameters? As we always do, the parameters of UPSC question. Right. So for example, this was a question which was asked in 2016. All right. This is a statement of India when it decided not to participate in the summit. UPSC क्या कह रहा है? You have to explain with suitable examples. All right, explain with suitable examples. I am confident that you will be able to write an answer to this question. All right. But I'm not so sure that if you depend on for everything on the class, including looking at the questions, it would be a good use of your time. So at some point, develop the habit of doing these things on your own, because this is not a one day exercise. All right. Okay. This is the question, and then next, this is the question. These are the two questions that we have seen. For example, this question in the context of BIMSTEC. So, what are the differences that you could notice in BIMSTEC and SARC? Similarities and differences can be on the same feature. चलिए सोचिएगा इस क्वेश्चन पे. अगली क्लास में जब हम आएंगे, आपको जब सोचने का टाइम मिलेगा, आई विल गिव यू टाइम टू थिंक, राइट, and then we will see. You have the opportunity, you have done the reading, writing, you know both about both of them. What kind of points do you come up with, right? And we will write the answer as an assignment in the classroom. All right, and within a very limited time. 15 मिनट 20 मिनट नहीं, तो 15 मिनट 20 मिनट जितनी तैयारी करनी हो आप तैयारी कर लें. Sources from printed material to current affairs to today's noting in the class, right? Chaliye, next let's move forward. We have already touched upon bilateral aspects of cooperation in the neighborhood, and we have also touched upon the regional aspects of cooperation in the neighborhood. Now we will simply, just for awareness, ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है कि हर region के लिए हम यही करें, ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है. In IR, for different relations you will learn something new, right? Some sets of relations would have common similar references. Some sets of relations would have newer ways of studying them, right? क्योंकि हिस्ट्री तो है नहीं, या कोई स्टैटिक सब्जेक्ट तो है नहीं कि बस एक ही तरीका है उसको पढ़ने का. उसके किसी भी सब्जेक्ट को पढ़ने के बहुत तरीके होते हैं, पर आईआर के अंदर सिंपली एक लेवल तक आपको प्रोसेस समझना है. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द प्रोसेस एंड देन यू हैव टू फॉलो, राइट, विथ पेशेंस. जहां आपको लगने लगता है कि आप बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, बहुत इंटेलिजेंट होना जरूरी है, जहां आप अपने आप को सीरियसली लेना शुरू करते हैं, सब्जेक्ट लाइक आईआर वेरी क्लियरली टेल्स यू कि बहुत सारे लोग आए और बहुत सारे लोग गए. ऑलराइट, दुनिया इतनी बड़ी है कि किसी भी के भी एक आदमी की समझ के परे है, एंड देयर बाय देयर हैज टू बी ह्यूमिलिटी, राइट, दैट देयर इज अ लिमिटेशन टू व्हाट आई कैन नो. ऑलराइट, आई कांट बी मास्टर ऑफ एवरीथिंग. सो देयर बाय वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क. कौन से पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क आर रिफर्ड और आर रिलेवेंट टू द नेबरहुड? So generally, based on a lot of things, we make reference to three. One is called the Gujral Doctrine, and I will not be now dictating anything on these topics, because these topics are found either in chapter 1 or in the middle or end of the neighborhood module in your printed material. बात समझ में आई आपको? तो आप सुनते सुनते जितना लिख सकते हैं वो प्रयास कीजिएगा. I will not dictate anything. ये मैं क्लियरली कह रहा हूं. Second is the approach which is called neighborhood first. All right, this is the second policy approach that we should be aware of. And third, to some extent, are relevant are policies like Sagar, or even when we talk about larger policy like Indo-Pacific, we understand that our Indo-Pacific would always include where we are. All right, it's a no-brainer. इसीलिए लास्ट में भी लिखा हुआ है, right? That if you want to, you are willing to stretch your imagination, you will find it quite obvious that it is important for these kinds of policies also. So Sagar, security and growth for all in the region, which India announced in the context of Indian Ocean. All right, and Indo-Pacific approach is developing in the context of Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So there may be overlap. Sagar, of course, we will talk about when we go to Indian Ocean. Indo-Pacific approach is a separate module itself, right, where we will enter into Southeast Asia, Pacific, and East Asia. So today we are going to talk about these two, because we are talking about South Asia as the neighborhood. All right. So here, first of all, the Gujarat doctrine, right? What would be helpful is looking at a question. Anyone, if you're bothered, do you remember any question that UPSC may have asked about Gujarat doctrine? Huh? In 2013, UPSC asked this question. All right. 2013, UPSC had asked 8 IR questions. That was the first examination under the changed pattern. 25 questions for 10 marks each. Right? Out of them 8 were IR. So बहुत सारे subjects का share उसमें ज़्यादा था. But still, this is a question that they asked, which we can say is from IR. We can also say that it is from world history, depending on how you look at it. What is meant by Gujarat doctrine or post-independence India, depending on how you look at it. What is meant by Gujarat doctrine? Does it have any relevance today? Discuss. Subject matter certainly is foreign policy, IR. Right? So, this is something, if you had looked at, for example, when we started, I said first chapter is for your reading. Right? Or read something like contemporary world politics. By reading them, of course, you will be able to answer these kinds of questions. Right? So now what is Gujarat doctrine? Very simply, Gujarat doctrine is a reference to the statements of the former Prime Minister and Foreign Minister, Mr. Inder Kumar Gujral. All right? He gave this proposition. In 1996, Gujarat doctrine is propounded. 1996 is the year. And you are aware of, इसके लिए भी सोचना पड़ेगा आपको, right? Or let's say 1996. Neighborhood first is talked about since 2014. So, Gujarat doctrine or neighborhood first are based on certain common features. For example, neighborhood is not going to change for Mr. Gujral or those who talked about neighborhood first. So it is in light of significance of India's neighborhood or significance India attaches to its neighborhood, about which we have already done a write-up in the first or second class initially to start with, whenever we started neighborhood, right? So neighborhood is important. Plus we also understand now the features of our neighborhood, that we have, for example, some neighbors which are difficult neighbors like Pakistan towards our northwest, or China. All right. Afghanistan has troubles because of different regions. So it makes sense, first of all, that there should be stability in the neighborhood, because we have already written that a stable, secure, prosperous South Asia is essential for India's national interest. All right. So how do you do it? By focusing on how relations can be improved, and also focusing on the structural factors. For example, like India is the largest country. India shares borders with all the countries of SAARC or South Asia, not vice versa. Bangladesh does not share a border with Nepal or Bhutan, or for example Pakistan, or Pakistan does not have a border with Sri Lanka, Maldives, or Bhutan, or Nepal, or Bangladesh, right? So thereby the Gujarat doctrine is both India's statement of its approach towards the neighborhood, as well as it contains a statement of principles, right, that India highlights consistently as part of its foreign policy, as well as part of its any policy, including neighborhood policy. So India's expectation plus statement of principles, plus also India's commitment to its smaller neighbors. All right. So what are the 5 principles of Gujarat doctrine? Number 1 principle is called non-reciprocity principle, which simply is that in its relation with neighbors like Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Maldives, India will not, or India shall not, seek reciprocity. All right. Rather, it does whatever it can in the spirit of good faith and trust. All right, good faith and trust. We don't ask our neighbors to do exactly the same thing for us. If we give them 2 rupees, we don't ask you should return us 5 rupees. It is not about profit. Rather, we will do because we want stability, trust-based relations. We will do it in good faith because we know that we are in that position. Second is the expectation, where in the Gujarat Doctrine states that no country of South Asia shall allow its territory to be used against the interest of another country of the region. That is the second principle, right? That is basically saying that you should not allow your territory to be used for, let's say, promoting terrorism against your neighbor, all right, or harming the interest of your neighbors. So no country of South Asia should allow its territory to be used against the interest of another country. That's the second principle. And then the third principle is that relations between countries of South Asia should be based on respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, right? This is principle. That relations would be based on, this is what we are saying, this is what we expect, would be based on respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, all right? And the next is the principle that no country should interfere in the domestic affairs of other countries, all right? No non-interference principle. No country should interfere in the domestic affairs of other countries, right? And then the next statement of the Gujarat Doctrine is that countries of South Asia should resolve their differences on the basis of peaceful bilateral negotiations, all right? Principle of bilateralism, principle of peaceful settlement of disputes, all right? So these are the principles that Gujarat Doctrine states. So what is its significance? First of all, as I said, it's a statement of both India's commitment and expectation to its neighbors. It's a statement of its approach towards the neighbor based on fundamental principles of India's foreign policy, right? Third, it addresses the difficulty of the neighborhood, where with two larger neighbors, India has difficult relations which are dependent, which are going to be resolved only in the long term. So thereby it's pragmatic to stabilize relations with other smaller neighbors. No good general opens all the fronts. So that is basically what its significance is. So that's why you will see, for example, with Bangladesh, we signed the Ganges Water Agreement in 1996. We did not say that you first give us passage. All right, you first listen to us on connectivity and then we will sign the river water agreement. So that's basically an example, right? So this approach then is more towards idealism, has a pragmatic element, right? So what are its limitations? So limitations, it's not necessary that you need to be harsh, है ना? हार्श होना जरूरी नहीं है, क्रूड होना जरूरी नहीं है. आप किसी भी बात को, मुश्किल से मुश्किल बात को बड़ी आसानी से कह सकते हैं. And this is an art, certainly. This is not a science. 2 + 2 = 4. मेरा इंटरेस्ट और केवल मेरा ही इंटरेस्ट, right? So basically what we say about this is, one, its limitation is that it is tilted more towards idealism, all right? It is tilted more towards idealism. Second, we can say its limitation is that it is not applicable entirely in the case of China and Pakistan, though it holds the promise even to be applied in the case of China and Pakistan. Non-interference, sovereignty, territorial integrity, or peaceful resolution of disputes. Of course, India would say this to any country, but certainly it is not applicable as it is in the case of China and Pakistan, right? Thirdly, we can also say that it lagged. First of all, Mr. Gujral, its backer, could not or did not remain in power for a long time, all right? And thereby you can also say that it lagged concrete programs for implementation, all right? तो ये हम बात कह सकते हैं गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन के बारे में. But despite its limitations, of course, when you are answering this question also, you can point to the limitations when the relevance has been asked. But you must understand the answer to these questions is not a yes or no. It is not relevant. It's a balanced one. So of course, insofar as statement being a statement of India's approach or being statement of India's foreign policy principles or being directed towards India's smaller neighbors, this remains relevant. These are timeless elements, all right, that it is focused on neighborhood. Neighborhood is important for India today. It was important in 1996. It will remain important tomorrow also. So it focuses on the neighborhood, or it states India's approach or principle towards the neighbors, including stating the fundamental principles of India's foreign policy. It is relevant. And the way of ending this kind of question would always be, don't be limited to saying कि क्या गलत है. ये तो कोई भी बता देगा क्या गलत है. ये सबसे आसान काम है. जो काम हो रहा है उसमें बुराई ढूंढना, जो काम हो रहा है उसको क्रिटिसाइज करना. लेकिन उसको कैसे अच्छे से लेंगे? तो हम ये कह सकते हैं कि द गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन नीड्स टू बी कॉम्प्लीमेंटेड बाय और टू बी कॉम्प्लीमेंटेड बाय pragmatic program of action. Need to be complemented by pragmatic program of action. Right? 10 नंबर के लिए इतना लिखना काफी है. ज्यादा बढ़ाना चाहें तो आप पैड अप करें इसके ऊपर या मेहनत करें, दोनों ही चीजें. Right? So this is how you could have answered this question. That is India's approach towards the neighborhood. Gujarat doctrine, if you see, still no government would say that it is not, there is something incorrect there, right? And remember, when we study foreign policy, sometimes our approach becomes the personality, the period, the party. At least for me personally, that is irrelevant. भाई मैं तो टीम इंडिया से खेल रहा हूँ, आप अपना सोच लीजिए. All right. So for me, the foreign policy of 1947 was also India's foreign policy. Foreign policy of 2014 is also India's foreign policy. So I talk about India's foreign policy. Ideally, in UPSC examination, we should talk about India's foreign policy. Mistakes are ours, achievements are also ours. All right. So that's basically what. अब बाकी टीम मैच हार जाए तो एक अप्रोच हुआ कि अपनी टीम के मेंबर की बुराई करो, तेरी वजह से हारे, तेरी वजह से हारे. राइट? या फिर आप ये सोचे कि भाई वी आर ऑल इन द टीम, किसी की वजह से भी हारे हारे, and the impact is on everyone. What is to be done today? So बहुत बार हम इस क्वेश्चन में चले जाते हैं, उस समय किसकी गलती थी? अगर आप ये जान भी लेंगे तो आप क्या करेंगे एक सेटिस्फैक्शन के अलावा, राइट? So that's basically something that you should keep in mind when you are reading something. You are trying to be civil servants for India, right? Now coming to, that's where we say there is always continuity in foreign policy with change. Time changes, circumstances change, country changes, people change. That's why there would be change also, right? All has to be understood in its perspective. Nobody is beyond criticism. Nobody needs to be worshipped, right? So neighborhood first. Let's talk about it. So neighborhood first, how can we see it? Again, it's a continuation of India's approach towards its neighborhood. It is emerging in a new context. What is the new context? A new government formation, a new government, a new leadership, and under them the neighborhood policy is referred to as neighborhood first. Since 2014, neighborhood first has become a frame of reference for our neighborhood approach, our neighborhood policy. It is seen through policy statements or its usage consistently. राइट? तो ऐसे हम जानते हैं कि देयर इज, ऐसा कहीं लिखा हुआ नहीं कि देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड नेबरहुड फर्स्ट, राइट? सो वी नो दैट दिस इज द अप्रोच टू आवर नेबरहुड एंड दिस इज आवर करंट पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क और नेम ऑफ द करंट पॉलिसी फ्रेमवर्क. Similarities with Gujarat doctrine would be, of course, it would be based on the same factors on which Gujarat doctrine was based. Of course, it would be based on, or it would talk about the same principles that the Gujarat doctrine talks about. All right? So thereby, this has to be understood. And then the features of, the aims of, elements of neighborhood first could be also understood, delineated. Right? So as I said in the printed material, please read it. But what we can say about neighborhood first is apart from the similarities or the continuous factors, that the neighborhood first is based on India's commitment to provide its neighbors needs based assistance. All right. And what is this based on? As the name suggests, neighborhood first. The first point, very simply, is that the neighborhood first approach prioritizes India's neighborhood in its foreign policy, diplomatically and politically. All right. So it's a reference to India prioritizes its relations with the neighbors, neighborhood first. First among what? First among all the relations. All right. So it basically is a statement of India's priority, diplomatic and political priority, which it accords to the neighbors. Right? In what ways is it reflected? It is reflected in India's commitment to provide needs based assistance to its neighbors. What kind of assistance? Assistance in areas like connectivity and infrastructure, assistance in areas like economy and trade, assistance in areas like security, assistance in promoting people to people ties, and assistance in what we can call capacity building. All right, capacity building support, infrastructure connectivity, trade transit, people to people interactions. Right? So, across all these areas, and mainly capacity building support to our neighbors. Second, neighborhood first approach also includes Indian Ocean in its purview. All right. So for us, Indian Ocean is part of both. For example, our immediate neighborhood and extended neighborhood. Indian Ocean is so large that you can think of it in terms of different sub-regions. Right. So the neighborhood first approach thereby also includes the neighboring Indian Ocean region in its under its ambit. It's a promotion of cooperation there also. Then what we can say is that the neighborhood first approach is based on India's efforts at creating a favorable narrative of India as the engine of growth for South Asia. Right? It's a part of India's attempt to create a favorable narrative of India as the engine of growth in the neighborhood or South Asia or in the neighborhood. Right? And why would we like to do that? Because, of course, as we have mentioned, 70% of demography, 70% of geography, economy is India. So, तो गाना आजकल चलता है ना, मैं नहीं तो कौन, तो वैसे ही बात यही, इंडिया नहीं तो कौन. This is our region. We are the most capable one. So we realize that it is based on realization of our capabilities, but more importantly, it is also based on realization of our responsibilities. Right? फिल्मों का डायलॉग है ना, with great power comes great responsibility. Right? Which they keep on repeating in Spider-Man. So of course, if you want to be great power, what good a great power you are when your neighbors don't think that you are any good. All right? जैसे वो कबीर दास ने कहा है ना, बड़ा हुआ सो क्या हुआ, जैसे पेड़ खजूर. तो खजूर का पेड़ बनना है या बड़ा बनना है, ये हमको तय करना है, या बड़ा खजूर के पेड़ की तरह बनना है, ये हमको तय करना है. So that's why this is what it does, right? And then flowing from the previous point that I mentioned, it is in a way also conducive for creating a model of India-led regional integration. All right. So it is aimed at creating a model of India-led model of regional integration acceptable to our neighbors. India-led model of regional integration acceptable to our neighbors. Right? So India does not want to be big brother or hegemon. India wants to be a leader on the basis of acceptance. आपको कहने की जरूरत नहीं पड़नी चाहिए कि आप इंपॉर्टेंट हैं. अगर आपको कहने की जरूरत पड़ रही है आप इंपॉर्टेंट हैं, जैसे बहुत सारे अफसर जो है वो जनता से लड़ जाते हैं किसी की थप्पड़ मारते हुए तस्वीर आ जाती है, फिर बाद में होता है ट्रांसफर हो गया, ये हो गया, जनता को बात करने का मौका मिलता है। तो अगर आपको एक अफसर होते हुए भी लड़ना पड़ रहा है जनता से, तो नुकसान आपका नहीं, आप कभी भी आप नहीं जीतेंगे इस सिचुएशन में, राइट? इफ यू गेट इनटू a confrontation with a common man, remember there is no situation where you are going to emerge victorious. It would be a very bad optics, apart from the fact that other repercussions may also be there. So it's always better that you carry out yourself out in such a way that there is cordiality, there is respect, and that is what we are saying, that the neighborhood first also aims at creating an India-led model of regional integration which is acceptable to the neighbors, right? So that's basically what we can say about the neighborhood first. And this is what you will see on in all relations. What kind of examples have we seen? Special trade arrangements with the neighbor, free trade agreement or duty-free access, connectivity projects. देख रहे हैं ना हम? Development assistance. So that is basically what a policy looks or seems like in its implemented aspects. और ये जरूरी नहीं कि पॉलिसी नहीं हो, ऐसा जरूरी नहीं है ये. दिस इज नॉट द इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. द इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज व्हाट इट इज डूइंग. सो इट इज प्रमोटिंग इंडियाज इंटरेस्ट इन द नेबरहुड, राइट? सो again, the challenges to neighborhood first comes from similar factors. For example, a historical sensitivity on issues like sovereignty and territory in South Asia. B, based on that, bilateral contentions. All right, bilateral contentions हैं इस एरा में भी हैं. ऐसा थोड़ी ना हुआ कि गायब हो गए, है, because that is the characteristic of those issues. Then if you see, the challenge, for example, comes from increasing assertion of China and its presence in the neighborhood, है ना? एक तो ये है. तो आपको ही लीडर नहीं बनना, किसी और को भी बनना है, एक तरह से कंपटीशन है, राइट? राइज ऑफ चाइना, इट्स असर्शन, इट्स प्रेजेंस इन द नेबरहुड. तीसरा is again common factors like lack of connectivity, lack of regional integration. ये अभी भी चैलेंज है, उसके लिए एपेटाइट नहीं है. जो स्टेटस दिखता है as seen in the limitation of SARC, वो भी एक चैलेंज है हमारे लिए, राइट? सो the features of problems that continue, ये चैलेंज है इस तरह से because they have to be addressed by neighborhood first. तब हम 20 साल बाद जाके कहेंगे that neighborhood first was a successful policy. आज नहीं. All right, something which is happening currently, we cannot be a judge of it. We can only be a judge of it if we are partisan. We can say that where it is going wrong, what limitations are, right, in matter, and how it can be done better. So these are the limitations which are there, and the next limitation, of course, is the lack of resources. हम जितना रिसोर्स होगा हमारे पास उतना हम लगा पाएंगे. बट मोर इंपॉर्टेंट देन दैट इज द इम्प्लीमेंटेशन बॉटलनेक. ऑलराइट, तो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन करने को पे ध्यान देना होगा, राइट? वी हैव टू इम्प्लीमेंट आवर projects in a time bound and efficient manner. All right, ये करना होगा. So this is basically what we call the neighborhood first. All right, neighborhood first. Please go and read about it, right? But we simply have to remember that as words, neighborhood first or Gujarat doctrine may become phrases that you use in answers. For example, in a Sri Lanka answer, Maldives answer, neighborhood answer, these terms are important, right, as a frame of reference. Chaliye, going beyond the neighborhood then. If you have any questions, more than welcome, but we have completed the neighborhood. Perhaps we can look at some other questions. For example, by now, at least by mention, you are capable of answering this kind of question, right? Consider the following pairs. अब ये हम नहीं कह सकते neighborhood question है, पर some element of neighborhood is there, right? Consider the following pairs. Community sometimes in the affairs mentioned in the news. All right, Kurd, Bangladesh, Madhesi, Nepal, Rohingya, Myanmar. What do you think is the answer? C, which is 2 and 3 only, because we certainly know Madhesi and in Nepal and Rohingya in Myanmar are two correct options. Kurds we don't know, but we know that in Bangladesh's context we hear about Rohingyas being a refugee there. Kurds are people found in various parts of West Asia, Turkey, Syria, north of Iraq, Iran. All right, this is where you will find the Kurds. That's also a large ethnic community. Now, this is the question that UPSC asked in 2020. UPSC asked very few questions of this kind, but still, let's see whether you can answer or not. Consider the following statements. The value of Indo-Sri Lanka trade has consistently increased in the last decade. Textile and textile articles constitute an important item of trade between India and Bangladesh. In the last 5 years, Nepal has been the largest trading partner of India in South Asia. Which of these statements given above are correct? बताइए. हाँ? A, 1 and 2 only. Right, so you are correct. General रेफरेंस से हम इस चीज को जान सकते हैं कि बांग्लादेश का बड़ा कारोबार टेक्सटाइल का है. इसके लिए कोई एक्सपर्ट होने की जरूरत नहीं, पढ़ते पढ़ते अखबार यही सारी चीजें पता चल जाती है अपने आप. राइट, ये कोई क्वेश्चन ऐसा नहीं है जो बहुत डीप एक्सपर्ट बनने के लिए कह रहा है, और ऐसा भी नहीं है कि हम यही क्वेश्चन क्लास में पढ़ाते रहे. हम सब्जेक्ट पढ़ाते हैं. वी स्टडी एरियाज. क्वेश्चंस कम फ्रॉम areas either directly or by correlation, right? So this, we know that value of Indo-Sri Lanka trade for first of all has not increased consistently. It has increased, but it has not increased consistently. There is no relation where you can say that trade has increased consistently for India. Generally there is no relation where you can say this, because if you are talking about 10 years, in 1 year, right, for example, let's say in 2014, I'm only giving you an example, not saying this is a fact. 2014, the trade may have been 6 billion US dollars, right, which is larger as compared to 2012, right? But it may so happen that in 2014 or 13, 2013, the trade may have been 5 billion US dollars. So growth from 2011, but not consistent growth. ये generally common sensical है, right? So again, and this also gives you an idea what kind of info. आप पूछते हैं ना कि क्या याद रखना चाहिए, facts याद रखने होंगे क्या, ऐसे patterns को समझने की कोशिश करो. So again, this question gives you a lens. What kind of information is UPSC seeking? Now you don't need YouTube motivational videos to do this kind of an exercise. This kind of an exercise can only be done by personal application. अपना time निकाल के. क्यों? क्योंकि आपको बनना है सिविल सर्वेंट. ऑलराइट, नींद आ रही है? छुट्टी करें तो जाओ जाओ. मेरे क्लास में मुझे कौन कब आ रहा है इससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, जब तक आवाज नहीं कोई कर रहा है या जब जबरदस्ती हिल नहीं रहा है आई के रेंज में. There is only one weakness that I generally try to not get irritated, but that is my personality. So specifically, if in this zone somebody is moving, what happens it breaks the flow of ideas. All right, तो ये चीजें होती है. चलिए कोई नहीं, तो अगला क्वेश्चन तो हो गया, इतना ही क्वेश्चन है. चलो ये क्वेश्चन हम आंसर कर लेंगे. अब अगला हमारा टास्क है टू गो टू अनदर नेबर, बट इट इज नॉट लाइक अ नेबर इन South Asia, the kind of neighbors that we saw. So today we will make a start for China, and we will start talking about India-China relations so that we can continue with that and then now pick up speed in further topics. Yes, please. Again, you are doing the same thing which you did the last class. When I said that we can talk about limitations, अब कोई बता पाएगा इस चीज को? आप बताइए. It's tilted towards more idealism. दूसरा, yes, not entirely as it is applicable in the case of neighbors like China and Pakistan. Or concrete pragmatic programs for implementation were lacking. ये बोला था हमने सुधांशु इस बुरे दौरान. ऑल राइट, और इतना काफी है इसके लिए. राइट, लिमिटेशंस, चैलेंज क्या है इसको फेस करना. और इसके अलावा एक और कहा था हमने, नहीं नहीं, वो तो नेबरहुड फर्स्ट के केस में कहा था, राइट? चलिए, इतना काफी है इसके लिए, लेट्स मूव ऑन. Sir, is it all about India and China in Southeast Asia? Where does USA and West stand in this? Again, Robin, you are asking a question before time. There has to be a flow towards things. Now we have completed neighborhood, we'll go towards China and then we will go towards Southeast Asia. There, you will understand these things. एक ही दिन में तो सब नहीं पढ़ा सकता ना, right? चलिए. Okay. So when we talk about China, what do you think of this relationship? Let's start with that only. आपको ही बोलने का मौका देता हूँ, जिनको छुट्टी पे जाना था सबसे पहले उनको. What do you think about India-China relations? नहीं, मैंने ये पूछा, ये What do you think about India-China relations? देखो, एक चीज और जीवन में याद रखो, जो बात बीत चुकी है ना उसको वहीं रहने दो, उसको वापस लाए कोई फायदा नहीं. अभी सवाल का जवाब दो ना. What do you think about India-China relations? हाँ? अच्छा, you are feeling bad that I referred. It's all right. Please. आप में से कोई बताना चाहेगा? We always hold the key to where the conversation is going. Tit for tat is not always a good strategy. कोई और बताएगा? What do you think? The question is, what do you think? हाँ? Strained relations. Yes? Difficult relations. आपको भी लगता है? Difficult relations. आप बोलना चाहेंगे? क्या लगता है आपको इंडिया चाइना रिलेशंस के बारे में? तीनों दोस्त जो वहां बैठते हो, बताओ. डिफिकल्ट कह रहे हो? तुम तो कुछ अलग कह दो. एंटागोनिस्टिक. उससे आगे नहीं जाएंगे, उससे आगे नहीं जाना है. और कोई एनीवन एल्स? कल्चरल. अच्छा, चलिए. आई डिडंट गेट व्हाट आई थॉट I'll get. Turmoil in relations is what Saurabh Kumar is saying. Yes, online students also. Why don't you chip in with what you think about the relation? War-ridden relationship, Jaswinder का कहना है. War-ridden relationship. Sekulen का कहना है not good. Very bad. अब उसका एक वो भी आ गया synonym. Prince का कहना है very bad relation. एक का कहना है not good, एक का very bad. Ganta Shruti says not sure but definitely not normal. All right. Trade only relation, ये अभिषेक का कहना है. Sawan says perplexed. Who is perplexed? You, the relation, India or China? All right. If you are referring to the relation, you should say perplexing. All right. Okay. Chaliye, you have some sense. The idea is very simply to give a formal shape to this sense, right? So we can say, for example, to start with, that India and China, right? This is an exercise to familiarize ourselves with terminology and to address difficulties like difficulty of starting, right? So for example, somebody asked you this question, your answer can be, पहले तो आप सोच सकते हैं, आपके पास हमेशा सोचने के लिए टाइम है. दूसरा, your answer should give something more than not good, very good, difficult, challenging, antagonistic. वो ठीक है to start with, but you should be able to give it some formal shape. Why? Because you are aiming for such a job. All right, you are aiming for such a job. So we can say that India-China relations are complex and multi-layered. Complex and multi-layered. All right. Complex and multi-layered relations between India and China. It conveys in itself a lot of things. A lot of what you also said is conveyed in this, right? So for example, if you're saying trading partner, zigzag relation, ab ye aa gaya. Competitive relations, economical distrust, fight for dominance, all these things are there. But somebody said culture, that is also there. All right. So it's a complex relationship. That's certainly we can say from a long-term perspective, right? Multi-layered ka matlab kya? That this relationship is not only there in the bilateral matters, this relationship spans across not only bilateral matters, but also regional. It has regional and global aspects. All right, regional and global aspects, right? Regional and global aspects, ये मतलब है मल्टी लेयर्ड का, right? अब now it is up to you whether you use it mechanically or you use it to develop your own thinking, right? Or analysis, ये आपके ऊपर है. Now when we say complex, it also means that in this relationship you will find at the same time the presence of cooperation, competition is a given between India and China. There is also contention, which has been a subject of, some of it has been the subject of a war in 1962, contention on territory and borders, right? Contention is there also in economic matters, which is subject of our competition, right? And also the current status on the border, whether you are concerned about what happened in Arunachal Pradesh or you are concerned about what happened in 2020. That's all an example of how India and China have contentious issues. Some of them have been subject of conflict in the past also, right? So then this is the meaning of it, right? And we can also say that China is unlike any other neighbor. It's a neighbor, sure, but it is unlike any other neighbor that you can compare it with. That should be very simple. You cannot compare it with any other neighbor economically, or in terms of size, area, or in terms of demography, population. So that should be a no-brainer. It's a neighbor with a long and contested borders. All right. So it's a neighbor with which we have a long border, but it's also a neighbor with which the border is contested. The long border is contested, right? Now, we can also say that it is a large, even now, a large trading partner. It's a large trading partner with a large trade deficit for India. Trade is also large, but so is trade deficit. In this case, trade deficit on part of India. And then we can say that it is unavoidable geopolitically, it is unavoidable geopolitically, geo-economically, and geo-strategically. All right, it is unavoidable. So that is something that can be a starting point for any relationship. Some idea, right? Some idea, so that you don't have to say difficult, antagonistic, right? So that you can start by saying that India and China share a complex and multi-layered relation. The relation spans across the areas of bilateral, regional, and global engagements. The relation has all the elements of cooperation, competition, and contention, and also a history of conflict. China is unlike any other Indian neighbor, as it's a neighbor with long and contested border, as it's a neighbor with a large trade and also a large trade deficit. So it's also an economic question bilaterally. But beyond bilateral, anywhere else in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, Indo-Pacific, etc., in Africa. China is geo-economically unavoidable. You are going there for markets, resources. China is also there. Geopolitically unavoidable. You have relations with your neighbors. China is also developing relations with your neighbors, right? And geostrategically unavoidable. You want to go beyond your region. You are talking about Indo-Pacific. China is talking about Indian Ocean. All right. So that's something that is a feature of this relation, right? So India and China share trans boundary rivers where India is a lower riparian. All right, India is a lower riparian. Okay, India is a lower riparian. Then China is a Pacific country with expanding interests in the Indian Ocean region. All right, China is a Pacific country with expanded interest in the Indian Ocean region, or rather than expanding interest in the Indian Ocean region. India has growing interest in the Pacific, or what now it calls Indo-Pacific. All right, China is a Pacific or Asia Pacific country, right? So these are also some of the features that would be very significant in terms of talking, at least starting to talk about. और इतने पे आप इंटेलिजेंट कन्वर्सेशन कर लेंगे चाइना के बारे में, राइट? So that's what we can say about China right now. And if you can't value what you are getting in the class, then I mean, I can't say much about that. But certainly learn what is worth learning, right? So this is, in a simple sense, जो question मैंने आपसे पूछा ना, what do you think of China? So UPSC also ask, what do you think? So the answer to what do you think is this, not what actually do you think. कि मेरे दिमाग में जो आया बोलना ही है, मेरे मुंह में जो आया बोलना ही, कोई फिल्टर नहीं. तो वो रिटन मीडियम में काम नहीं आता, और वो दूसरा पर्सनालिटी टेस्ट में काम नहीं आता, राइट? मतलब ये दिस इज नॉट अ यूपीएससी रिलेवेंट स्किल. ऑलराइट, यू आर नॉट गिवन मार्क्स फॉर स्टैंडिंग टू मच आउट ऑफ एवरीवन. इतना भी ज्यादा स्टैंड आउट नहीं करना है, राइट? किसी ने कह दिया लीडरशिप क्वालिटीज डेवलप करनी, इतना भी ज्यादा नहीं कि यू स्टैंड आउट, राइट? सो आई विल एंड टुडेज क्लास with a statement of Deng Xiaoping, a Chinese leader under whom China started its economic opening up in the 1970s. A leader who is considered to be among the three important leaders of China so far. One is Mao Zedong, another is Deng Xiaoping, another is current president Xi Jinping. So Deng Xiaoping said, and this was his message to his own country, China, that China should hide its capabilities, bide its time, and never claim leadership. All right? China should hide its capabilities, bide its time, and never claim leadership. So with this thought, there is a good thought to end the class with. This is a food for thought also, those of you who would like to think. And when we come next, we will try to expand this discussion starting from this germinal point. All right? Thank you very much. That would be all for today. We'll meet next and continue.